The Summoning Jutsu is one of the staples of the Naruto series. Characters call their summons to help them in battle and to do all sorts of interesting things in the battlefield. Usually the summons are gonna be massive creatures with gargantuan power, but there's a great variety to them and we see a lot of very powerful ones. So in this video we're gonna be ranking the strongest summons in the Naruto series. There's gonna be one exception to this list, and it's that I'm not going to be counting the Edo Tensei summons, because even though the Edo Tensei Jutsu is a summoning jutsu, I want to focus more on the beasts and creatures of the Naruto universe. Starting off with number 11, it's gonna be Baku, Danzo's giant elephant chimera thing. And that's a very overlooked summoning jutsu, probably because it's from Danzo and people tend not to like the guy very much, even though he's done nothing wrong. But just look at the size of the elephant. It's massive. If you compare it to Sasuke's corporeal Susanoo, it just dwarfs it, occupying the entire space of the samurai bridge that Sasuke and Danzo fought on. Baku was one of Danzo's trump cards. He decided to use that jutsu when he made a plan to finally catch Sasuke after analyzing all of his movements and saying that the next minute shall be the minute he catches Sasuke and kills him, because he was running out of Izanagi, so he needed to catch Sasuke in the next minute anyways. Even Obito, who's watching the battle, is impressed. He says, "Oh, that's Baku. I heard about that. It's bigger than I expected it to be." So this creature even has some notable in-universe lore, and it does some pretty powerful stuff. It sucks in the air and essentially everything from the environment into its mouth, consuming it. This is a nightmare to deal with if you think about it. It could in theory destroy an entire army of ninjas that are just sucked into the creature's mouth, and it was able to almost destroy Sasuke's Susanoo, pulling off the skin layer of the Susanoo and almost cracking its ribs. And then Danzo comes from behind and attacks the Susanoo's back, which was unprotected because of Baku's attack. Didn't work out. The Susanoo rib still tanked Danzo's wind style, but just to damage a Susanoo is something pretty impressive. Still, Baku's only gonna get number 11 here because it has a very glaring weakness, which is essentially fire style or anything threatening that you spit towards the creature's mouth. Sasuke was able to casually counter the beast with a fire style fireball jutsu because, well, Baku doesn't really have much control over what he's sucking into his mouth, so he literally just swallowed Sasuke's fire, which really hurt the beast and caused him to unsummon itself. So this thing is pretty powerful, but it has a massive weakness, and that's probably why Danzo didn't use it from the beginning of the fight, because he knew, yeah, Sasuke's probably gonna catch on to the fact he could just spit a fireball into the thing and then he's gonna kill it or just unsummon it, so I'm gonna use it for a specific attack that I'm going to burst towards Sasuke to try and catch him off guard for a split second there. Moving on to number 10, we have Ibuze, Hanzo's salamander summon. Ibuze is definitely not as big as many of the summons on this list, which may be a little disappointing because the guy was supposed to be stronger than the three great Sannin, and yet his summon was much smaller than the Sannin summons, but, you know, it is what it is. It still has some very interesting abilities, mainly the ability to burst poison clouds, and very toxic ones at that. In theory, this creature could take on an army as well. If the shinobis don't leave the poisonous gas, they can all die. And poison is something really tricky to deal regardless of how powerful you are, because, well, if you don't have an antidote or immunity to the poison, then there's nothing much you can do. You can be the most powerful dude on earth, but the poison's still gonna get you. Even still, there are ways to counter poison. Sakura, when she was fighting against Sasori, for example, used an explosive tag to disperse the poison cloud, so it's not as though poisonous clouds are an auto-win condition here, but they certainly are very powerful to be used in the battlefield, and especially Hanzo using it because he has the immunity to the poison his own salamander exudes. Now, some people really like to play up Hanzo's strength because he took on the three legendary Sannin. He was the guy who named them the three legendary Sannin, but even still, you cannot say that the salamander was stronger than any of the Sannin summons because the Sannin weren't even using their summons when they fought against Hanzo. I mean, maybe they used it before him, but we just don't see it, and there are no signs that they even used it, as we don't know a whole lot about what happened in the fight against Hanzo. The salamander's poison is definitely powerful, but it's not going to be as powerful as the next entries on this list. Number 9 is going to be Gengetsu's massive clam. For those of you who don't know, Gengetsu is the second Mizukage. He's a member of the Hozuki clan, the same clan as Suigetsu, and he has this massive clam that he can summon and create illusions. Genjutsu, essentially. Gengetsu is a really funny character. I think he's one of the most underrated and underappreciated characters in the series. His personality, his jutsus, everything the guy has going for him is nice. And his clam was able to put an entire battalion of the 4th Division under a genjutsu, a collective genjutsu essentially. There were several ninjas tossing shurikens, kunais, and trying to attack Gengetsu, but he was just an illusion. He was literally telling everybody how to beat the guy, and they were not really getting it because he's that powerful. I'm genjutsu, guys! Don't attack me! You have to go after my clam! And the problem is that the clam is invisible because it's also casting a genjutsu, so it's not visible anymore. And that's a very impressive thing. There's nothing else in the verse that can cause an AoE genjutsu, if you think about it. You know, a genjutsu that affects an entire area, unless if you're talking about the infinite Tsukiyomi. And if you take into account that Gengetsu was not really fighting seriously here, he was just being used as the Edo Tensei, and Kabuto wasn't really controlling him to do that much damage. This AoE genjutsu would be so scary if Gengetsu was actually serious in the fight. Because during the entire fight, he wasn't attacking anybody during the genjutsu phase of the clam. He was just hanging back, doing nothing, and letting the alliance hit his illusion and do nothing, essentially. It took both Gaara and Onoki to find the clam and defeat it, and that was not all. I mean, Gengetsu kept going, but the clam is an extremely powerful summon, and I have to imagine it was very annoying to deal with back in the day when Gengetsu was actually trying. Number 8 is gonna be Gamabunta, and some people may be annoyed because, wow, how is Gamabunta so low? Obviously, Gamabunta is extremely powerful, but every single summon on this list is gonna be powerful too. It's just that the ones above him are more powerful than he is, which is nothing to be ashamed of, because this dude, you know, this massive toad here, he is powerful. He carries a massive sword and seems very proficient with it when he is dueling against the summons of the Animal Path. When Pain invades the Leaf Village, it was fighting against Manda and Orochimaru in the 3-way deadlock. It was also able to create one of the most gargantuan fire style jutsus with Jiraiya combining his fire style with Gamabunta's oil to create the insane fireball. But the most impressive Gamabunta fight was the one against Shukaku. Literally a tail beast. And yes, Shukaku is the weakest tail beast, but it's still very impressive that Gamabunta was so relative to him. Gamabunta managed to cut off Shukaku's arms. He was spitting those massive water style bullets that were clashing against Shukaku's wind style bullets, and they were pretty much equal in power, exploding mid-air and essentially destroying the forest around them. Now, I'm not saying Gamabunta was stronger than Shukaku because Naruto had to cheese the fight to win. He just woke up Gaara, which essentially made the body of Shukaku crumble away. But they still managed to pull off a win here. And another very impressive feat Gamabunta has over a tail beast is when Minato summons him to essentially halt the Nine Tails for a bit. And I mean, the Nine Tails is no joke. It's literally the Nine Tails, and Gamabunta manages to take the Nine Tails to the ground for a couple of seconds as Minato prepares his teleportation jutsu to take the beast away from the Leaf Village. So definitely a very powerful beast. Number 7 is going to be Manda. Now, some people may be upset here because Jiraiya's summon is below Orochimaru's summon, but one has to be below the other. And Manda seems to be more impressive when it fights against Gamabunta because it's also fighting against Katsuyu at the same time during the 3-way deadlock. Manda was extremely fast. It could burrow underground and attack opponents from behind. It could use its skin change substitution jutsu, and that's how it survived the massive fire style combination from Jiraiya and Gamabunta. And it also managed to withstand Datara's C0 explosion for a split second. I mean, it didn't take the entire explosive force of that jutsu, otherwise it would have been vaporized, but it bought Sasuke enough time to reverse summon himself out of there. And also, Orochimaru and Kabuto seemed pretty afraid of Manda when they first summoned it in the 3-way deadlock. They were like, well, Manda, please be chill here. We're gonna give you 100 human sacrifices to compensate you for this. And Kabuto was like, okay, if Manda finds out Orochimaru doesn't have his arms, then, well, he's not gonna be stopped because Orochimaru is not gonna be powerful enough to contain Manda. And yet, Jiraiya and Tsunade don't really have this problem with their summons because they're much more friendly with them. But even still, having Kabuto and Orochimaru afraid of you, it says something about your power. Later in the war arc, Kabuto manages to create a new Manda with modified DNA, more powerful than the previous one, and it uses it to choke the turtle island Naruto was training on, and that island was absolutely gargantuan. Manda was exceptionally powerful. Number 6, Katsuyu. Now, you may be saying, well, hold on. You said that Manda scaled above Gamabunta because Manda was fighting against Gamabunta and Katsuyu at the same time, so how come you put Katsuyu above Manda here? But let me explain. There are different variations to the Katsuyu summon, because the original Katsuyu is essentially a slug so big, nobody can visibly summon the entire thing, so every time Katsuyu is summoned in the series, it's just a section of Katsuyu's original body. The Katsuyu Tsunade summoned in the three-way deadlock so happened to be about the same power level as Manda and Gamabunta, a little bit lower than Manda, probably equal to Gamabunta, but the power of the summoning is going to depend on how much chakra the summoner uses to call in a section of Katsuyu's body. For example, in the war arc, Tsunade and Sakura joined their powers to summon 10% of Katsuyu's body, and the slug uses its body as a type of terrain which is going to be healing and recovering the entire alliance. Allied ninjas that step on Katsuyu's body are gonna be healed by Sakura, Tsunade, and Katsuyu. And yes, this is one of Katsuyu's main powers. It's a support summon because it heals people very well. It can transmit the chakra of the summoner to the person who's wounded and recover them. Tsunade uses this most prominently in the Pain Invasion, where she essentially gives a Katsuyu clone to every single ninja in the Leaf Village so that Katsuyu can give them information and also heal them. Katsuyu also protected several ninjas from the Leaf Village after Pain's massive Shinra Tensei by essentially using her body as a shield so that they wouldn't die. And Katsuyu can also split its body to avoid attacks, such as when Manda wrapped itself around it and it just bursted into a billion smaller slugs and negated Manda's attack. Katsuyu also has some offensive capabilities with the acid it can spit, and it literally melts rock, so it's definitely not just a support summon. It can do some damage as well, albeit it's not its main priority. And hypothetically speaking, if somebody is able to summon the entire thing, this would probably be the strongest summon in the verse. It's just that nobody has the capability to do so. Number 5. The Multi-Headed Hound of the Animal Path. Obviously, the Animal Path of the Rinnegan has a lot of interesting summons. The Chameleon is very good for stealth and infiltration. The Rhino and the Bull hit very hard. You also have the Bird, which lets you fly, a very good thing in the battlefield. But the Multi-Headed Hound has to be one of the most powerful summons in the verse. First, because the hounds themselves are extremely powerful. They were fighting against Gamabunta, Gamahiro, and Gamaken in the Pain Invasion after Naruto arrives, and they were the ones actually trying to fend off the Multi-Headed Hound, which was an extreme problem for that fight. But if it was just because of the strength, then the hound wouldn't be that big of a deal. After all, Pain has other summons that hit as hard as the hound, but the hound has sheer hacks. Because every time the Multi-Headed Hound gets hit by an attack, it gains an additional head, and the hound can also split its body into its number of heads, so you can essentially do a dozen or so hounds if you hit the beast a lot of times, meaning that no matter what you do, the thing is gonna keep coming, it's gonna keep on multiplying. It's insanely powerful because of it. An immortal summon that just replicates no matter what you do? Yeah, count me in. This is extremely OP, and Jiraiya had a lot of trouble dealing with it. There are ways to counter the Multi-Headed Hound, but it's one of the most difficult summons to counter. Normal, extremely powerful attacks are not going to work against it, so you have to use something hacks to counter the hacks. KCM1 Naruto lands a massive Rasen Shuriken on it, and it does nothing in the war arc. I mean, KCM1 Naruto is extremely powerful, and he couldn't do much about the hound, so Itachi had to use Amaterasu, a jutsu that's complete hacks, and that keeps on burning no matter what to counter the beast. In the anime, Jiraiya used the frog stomach to absorb the Multi-Headed Hound, which was difficult to do after a lengthy exchange with Gamaken, and alternatively, you can also take down the Animal Path, but this is easier said than done. There certainly are other jutsus that could take care of the beast. A big enough Kamui should be able to take it out by transporting it to the Kamui dimension. Perhaps Particle Style would completely dismantle its body, but these are niche and hex abilities that not many people have, making this probably the hardest summon to kill in the entire verse. Number 4, we have the Monkey King Enma. Hiruzen's summon. Now, this is definitely the smallest summon on this list, but it's one of the strongest because Enma is no joke. A lot of people sleep on him because he's not that used in the series. Hiruzen doesn't really have the most screen time, but whenever he's on screen, he means business. Enma punched Hashirama on the face. Like, this is not a small feat. Sure, that Hashirama was an Edo Hashirama, very much nerfed, because Orochimaru's Edo Tensei was by no means perfect back in the Chunin exams, but still, it's interesting to see this summoning punching the god of Shinobi. Enma is said to be around Hiruzen's level of power. It was pretty confident it could simply kill Orochimaru by snapping his its neck during the fight against him. And that's not all, because Enma is an extremely versatile summon, probably the most versatile in this entire list. It can transform its body into Hiruzen's famous staff, which is extremely durable. It withstands attacks from Orochimaru's Kusanagi sword, and it also defends Hiruzen from Hashirama's Deep Forest emergence, creating what essentially looks like a cage around Hiruzen protecting him. And that's the interesting thing, the staff can shape change. The cage is one of the examples, but it can also extend and attack things that are further away from Hiruzen. The most impressive feat for Enma was when Hiruzen used it to essentially shove the Ninetales out of the Leaf Village. If Gamabunta just falling onto the Ninetales and holding it back for a couple of seconds is impressive, shoving the Ninetales out of the village is even more so. And Enma and the staff are just very important to Hiruzen's arsenal. He even uses it in the War Arc for everything he does. It's a shame that Enma never really comes out as Enma and he's just the staff in the War Arc. We don't really see the monkey anymore. But regardless, he is an extremely powerful summon. Number 3, Fukasaku and Shima. If Enma complements Hiruzen's fighting style by transforming into a staff, Fukasaku and Shima are essentially two Sage level allies that you bring into the battlefield, and I'm considering both of them as just one entry on the list because they come in a single package really. When you summon one of them, you're gonna summon both. It's what Jiraiya does in the fight against Pain. Shima has insane sensory capabilities, tracking down the chameleon of the animal path by sniffing it with its tongue. The water style attack that she used is insane. It cut the chameleon in half. They also had an extremely powerful combo jutsu with Jiraiya using air, oil, and fire and creating that hellish ocean of burning oil that's only countered because Pain can absorb ninjutsu. Fukasaku, you know, this very small toad is literally able to lift Gamabunta's massive body with his tiny little muscles and throw Gamabunta towards the animal path so that Gamabunta can swallow it and Naruto can defeat it. Like, they are pretty damn strong physically as well because they are sages and constantly draining sage energy from the environment, using to enhance their physical power. They also have access to insanely powerful genjutsu, the most prominent one being the Frog Song, which is one of the most powerful genjutsus in the entire series and definitely the most powerful auditory genjutsu in the series. Sure, it's difficult to sink in when they're singing with their weird voices, but when it does, it's pretty much game over. Jiraiya was able to defeat 3 of the Pain bodies because of the jutsu, and they're also able to use that jutsu in a more limited capacity, just like they used it in the Naruto versus Pain fight, stopping a couple of summons from coming towards Naruto and paralyzing them by screaming at them essentially. And when it comes to Jiraiya himself, they are extremely useful because they can maintain him on Sage mode for as long as they are summoned, because they can just stand on Jiraiya's shoulders and use Sage mode for him, imbuing Jiraiya with Sage energy, which is just a very OP combo. He doesn't run out of Sage mode, which is one of the Sage mode's most glaring weaknesses. You're gonna run out of it eventually, and you have to stay still to collect more Sage energy, something you can't really do mid-battle, but the Toads can do it for Jiraiya. They couldn't do it for Naruto because the Ninetales was disrupting their chakra and essentially blasting them away when they landed on Naruto's shoulder, but just providing a constant source of Sage mode to Jiraiya is one of the most OP things a summon could ever do. Number 2, the Gedo Mazo. Now, the Gedo Mazo is not very often used as a weapon in the series. It's mostly just used to contain the power of the tail beasts, but when it's used as a weapon, it is extremely powerful. The first time we saw it being used as an offensive summon was when Nagato brought it to the battlefield after Hanzo killed Yahiko, and he was extremely mad about it. Now, bear in mind that that Gedo Mazo didn't really have any tail beasts inside of it. It was an empty husk, but it was still extremely powerful. Nagato connected himself to the Gedo Mazo with those weird chakra rods and wreaked absolute havoc on Hanzo's army. He used the ethereal soul-stealing dragon to pretty much one-shot hundreds of ninjas at the same time. That is one of the most OP, overlooked, and underused jutsus in the Naruto series, and I've made a video just about that, and Hanzo was only able to escape because he teleported away. The other time the Gedo Mazo is used offensively was when Obito brought it to the battlefield of the 4th Great Ninja War to collect Ginkaku and Kinkaku's chakra. Obito summoned it at the beach after the battle had quieted down, and the Gedo Mazo was essentially destroying everything in its path. Choza and Choji in their gigantic forms couldn't do anything whatsoever about it. Kitsuchi's massive earth sandwich jutsu was countered by the Gedo Mazo's sheer strength, and that jutsu is extremely massive. It's basically two mountains trying to crush whatever's in the middle of them. And with the power of 7 tail beasts plus a tail from the 8 tails, the Gedo Mazo was able to use lightning style and rain lightning on the alliance. It's lucky for them that Obito didn't really hang around for very long. He just got what he needed in the battlefield and went away, because if the Gedo Mazo had stayed, it would have been very problematic. Now, there's also a danger in using the Gedo Mazo this way, and Obito was very aware of it. That's why he didn't really use the Gedo Mazo extensively as a weapon, and that's because the tail beasts are inside of it. Disrupting the Gedo Mazo could mean Obito would lose a tail beast, and that's not something he would want to do in the middle of the war, where he's trying to capture the 2 final ones to use the Infinite Tsukiyomi. But still, whenever the Gedo Mazo is used, it is extremely OP, both with Nagato and with Obito. Number 1 is gonna be Hikaku Uchiha. No, I'm just kidding. Number 1 is gonna be Naruto. Well, no, actually, it's not Naruto, but if you think about it, Shima summoned Naruto with many other toads into the battlefield when Pain attacked the Leaf Village and destroyed the entire thing. So technically, Sage Mode Naruto is a summon in the Naruto universe, but I'm not really trying to calculate the power of any shinobis here. I'm just looking at the beasts, so I wouldn't count him on this list, even though this would probably be the position he would take. I mean, Sage Mode Naruto, that is. But he wouldn't be number 1, because number 1 is the Nine Tails, Kurama herself. If you think about it, the Nine Tails is the only tail beast that's ever summoned through a summoning jutsu, except for when Hagoromo summons everybody from Kaguya's dimension after they defeat Kaguya and the tail beasts are already free. But they're not really used as weapons in that occasion. I mean, I guess you could say afterwards Sasuke uses their chakra to fuel his Susanoo after putting them into the Chibaku Tenseis, but you get what I mean. Hagoromo summoned them, but Sasuke used their power, so it didn't really count. However, we see the Nine Tails being summoned and used as a weapon a couple of times, and to great catastrophic effect. Chronologically speaking, Madara summons the Nine Tails to fight against Hashirama, the fight that would eventually create the Valley of the End. Madara used his own Susanoo to coat the Nine Tails with it and created the majestic attire Susanoo, one of the coolest looking things in the Naruto-verse. And also, Madara was using the Bijudama like Gatling gun, essentially. It was a billion Bijudamas laced with Madara's Susanoo sword against the Thousand-Armed Buddha statue. One of the most bonkers clashes in the entire series. Later on, Obito used the Nine Tails to attack the Leaf Village after extracting it from Kushina and summoning it in the middle of the Leaf Village. It dealt significant damage during its brief attack, killing several ninjas and essentially scarring the entire population of the Leaf Village into being very mean to Naruto his entire life because of the attack. And you may be saying, well, but the Gedo Mazo actually has 7 tail beasts at its peak power when Obito used it as a weapon, so why isn't it more powerful than the Nine Tails by itself? And that's because the Nine Tails is much more powerful than the 7 first tail beasts put together. Even if you throw in the 8 tails in the mix, the Nine Tail is still gonna be more powerful than all of them combined. So obviously the Nine Tails is no joke whatsoever. I don't really have to explain why the Nine Tails is so powerful. Naruto, with half of the Nine Tails' chakra, was able to match 5 tail beasts combined into a single massive tail beast used by 5 other Biju. And maybe, actually most likely, other Biju were also summoned in the battlefield sometime in the past, but we just never see it happening, so the only one I can put on this list is gonna be the Nine Tails as far as Bijus are concerned. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already if you enjoyed the video. This really helps me out with the YouTube algorithm. I'll appreciate it. And watch this other video right here for more cool Naruto content just like this. Thank you so much for watching, guys.